paint what you love and paint what you're truly passionate about. Because you can literally paint anything. Why, don't waste your time painting things that you aren't interested in or don't feel something about. I would always recommend finding something that you love to paint and just painting that. Stick with that. Fall in love with the process, fall in love with uh, the subject matter, whatever it is. Just really get passionate about it. And yeah, I think that'll come through in your work. And collectors will see that. It comes through on social media. It's maybe the most important thing to me is kind of following that, where your interests are and what you're desperate to paint next.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Arango-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On today's episode, we sat down with Blair Atherholt, a representational oil painter who specializes in still life paintings inspired by the old masters. Blair tells us about his education at the Schuler School of Fine Art, as well as how his exposure to fine art and his experience at the Schuler School led to a shift in his focus from concept art to traditional art. He also reminds us of the importance of falling in love with the work and to paint what you're truly passionate about and interested in, because that passion will come through in the work itself. Blair also advises us to pay attention to trends on social media, but to remain authentic and put your own personal spin on things to carve out your own content. He also emphasizes the importance of not feeling pressured to show everything on social media and to embrace your failures and to use them as an opportunity to grow and improve in your art. Finally, Blair tells us about his upcoming workshop at Aura 4 Tattoo and Gallery in Austin, Texas, as well as his participation in a summer salon at Canary Gallery in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome, Blair, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here and for being so excited to be here too. I'm excited to have you on because I think your still lives are really amazing. I think there's some of the best ones I've seen, at least in our generation.
Thank you.
Because you're welcome. Because I know that if you look in the past, like the Dutch masters, you just look at those and it's like, holy crap, how do they do that? Yeah. So seeing your work is also like, oh, someone can actually try to figure it out and see if we can do another Dutch golden age, except not Dutch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much. That means a lot.
Yes, of course. And then before we dive into more of your work, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Blair. I'm a representational oil painter. I sort of specialize in still life. That's kind of where my artistic passion lies. I also sort of dabble in pet portraits too. Yeah, I paint a lot of still life, and I really love those old masters, and that's sort of the core of the art education that I got, and where I sort of first started seeing what you could do in some ways with still life. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, and you also studied at a pretty good school in terms of like materials and like more of the classical sort of way of approaching things, right?
I did. Yeah, I'm a graduate of the Schuler School of Fine Art in Baltimore, Maryland. Fantastic school. It's an atelier style art school where you kind of jump in with both feet and you try everything. So, I was doing sculpture and watercolor and portrait, oil painting, obviously. And yeah, you kind of try everything. And then importantly, I think at an atelier, you kind of learn how those intermingle and how they're all connected, and it's all rooted in that classic style of learning and the old masters. So yeah, I loved my time at the Schuler School. That was a lot of fun. It's some great teachers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very inspiring too to be around, basically to be in a place where you're surrounded by people who have a very similar goal of like improving their technique and instructors who want to give you, all that information as well. I think that's one of the things
Right.
that I personally really loved about going to academic school as well. So I can totally relate.
Yeah.
Um, and then I wanted to ask you, when was the moment that you said, "I'm pursuing the path of the artist?"
It So there wasn't a single moment where I think I decided, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It was more of a evolution. Right out of high school, I sort of applied to your normal colleges, uh, just based on my, academics, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Um, I had grown up drawing all the time. That's kind of what I did in my free time when I was a kid. My dad's an artist, so I grew up in an art household with his paintings. He worked in the entertainment industry for a video game company as an artist as well. So I kind of got to see that side of his work. So I was sort of steeped in it, but again, like at the end of high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Um, so I, you know, kind of looked back and was like, well, I love to draw. I applied to these colleges, but maybe I could pursue the concept art realm of things. And Micah down in Baltimore as well had a really great, I think they still do have a really great digital art program. I knew a professor there who kind of walked me around the campus, and I was like, maybe I could try this. Unfortunately, part of their application process is having a portfolio of work, and I didn't have that. So I found myself kind of last minute taking some real art classes for the first time and trying to put together a portfolio of more technical drawings, not video game characters and monsters and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was running right up against the deadline, and I looked at the portfolio and I was like, I don't even like this. I don't think
Mm.
it's strong enough to get me anywhere. Why don't I'll just try, normal college. I went to Temple University for a semester. And I knew immediately when I got there that that was the wrong fit. I I started as a biology major for some reason. I thought maybe that I could be a doctor, which is very strange to say now because that's so clearly not what I was meant to do.
Mhm.
But while I was there, I just realized my passion for that was not there. And I've spent my whole time again drawing in class, instead of studying. So I realized that I should have I should have gone to art school. This is not where I'm meant to be. So that was
Mhm.
one step on. That was maybe the first real step I took on the path to being a full-time artist, and it took the shape of maybe instead of going to Micah, I could go to the same art school my dad graduated from, which is the Schuler School of Fine Art. And I applied while I was still in Philly. So, like halfway through the semester, I was like, I'm out of here. There's
Mhm.
no way this is going to work for me. And I got accepted to the Schuler School. I mean, they'll take anybody from the ground up and make you an artist, which is great. So I got in and I hung out in Philly for another couple weeks and then came back and started there at their spring semester. So that was, maybe the first real step I took on the path to where I am now.
Yeah.
And a couple, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, you go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, my plan for going to the Schuler School was to learn the technical side of art, learn how to draw, learn how to paint, build up some skills to, create a portfolio to take that into the concept art world. And I found that, through the 4-year program there, I kind of stopped caring about concept art. I sort of fell in love with traditional art and painting specifically. So it kind of like morphed as I was there. I was like, you know what? I really enjoy this. And like I'm getting pretty okay at it. So I think I could try this instead of, entering the the crazy world of concept art. So yeah, it's been
Yeah.
in summary, it's kind of a progression. I sort of grew and evolved throughout my process of art school and my exposure to fine art and everything. So yeah, there wasn't one moment, I guess, to
Right.
where I decided.
Right. Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of people would relate to that. Because I also did 2 years of college. And then I was like, just after like, I think it was the first semester, I was like, this is awful. This isn't what I want to do. So I
Yeah.
completely relate. Except I wasn't studying biology, which I think you were probably not doing like so great emotionally because biology is one of the harder like things to study in college.
Oh, I
Um,
flunked the first midterms and I was like,
oh,
oh, right.
yeah. Yeah, it's one of the harder ones. I studied
Yeah.
psychology, so it
Okay.
was a little easier. I still had to take, like, chem lab and all these things, but yeah, it's not fun when you go in because you're, like, trying to find something that works for you, and then suddenly, like, you're like, "Oh, no, no, this isn't gonna happen."
Right.
So I relate. I completely relate to that.
Yeah. And it's scary, because I mean, at least growing up, that's sort of what you did. Like you went to college and you got a degree and, at college, maybe you found the thing that you were interested in doing. So it was kind of scary leaving that like more traditional approach to higher education, for something like art, which can be unpredictable. Um,
Yeah, that's another good
but
point. Yeah, because I guess especially when you grow up in the United States, you're always told like, "Oh, you have to go to college." Like it's like inevitable. It's almost like everyone does it. You got to do it too.
right,
So,
right.
yeah. Yeah. And then also I always felt weird about that because it was always for me like why would I want to go somewhere that's going to put me in a ton of debt and
Yeah,
I'm not even going to enjoy it.
yeah.
So that's the other side of it, right? It's like compared to like the typical American university, going
Mhm.
to an atelier is as expensive as it is to go to, like, a community college, basically.
Right, right. It's
Yeah,
so much more approachable,
it is.
financially.
Yeah, and they'll actually teach you something. Like, if you go to a college art class, you're not gonna get any technique. You're just gonna get, like, the modernized contemporary approach to art, which is paint what you
Right.
feel. But it's like, "But what if I want to paint better?"
Yeah. I feel like I
Yeah,
wanna be good at this, so
exactly. Exactly. So it's a much
Yeah.
different way of approaching art. Or at least,
Yes.
it's not the right place for someone who wants to learn realism unless they're
Sure.
into like a lot of self-study and very little support. Because I've also met people who they've gone to colleges and they've studied like art at these colleges and they're hoping
Mhm.
to get technique, but they actually get beat down and they get asked like, why do you even want to learn to paint better? Essentially. Like they get like
Oh, boy.
rejected. So
Yeah,
it's yeah. Which
yeah.
is really unfortunate, because it leaves no space. Like, it's supposed to be like art is everything, right? So why isn't it
Mhm.
allowing space for, like, realism as well?
Sure.
Yeah. But, speaking of painting, I did wanna ask you also, why still life? Why did that become something that you decided to pursue?
I think for me, what I really enjoyed and still enjoy about still life is the level of control that I have in the creative process of it. You
Mhm.
know, I get to pick the I paint a lot of fruit. I get to pick the individual pear that I want to paint. I want to pick the grapes. I can control the lighting and play with the background and I just really from the get-go enjoyed that kind of customization
Hmm.
aspect of it that I felt that I had. I could throw something crazy up there and paint it, and it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Who cares? I didn't have like a model fee or something.
Yeah.
I could, paint that pair again or whatever. But I think that for me was the first thing that I really liked about it was, I can create my own little world in this still life.
Mm.
And the ability to, as I progressed, in my still life painting, started to realize like, oh, you can have like more narratives in it too. Like it doesn't just have to be individual objects that I think are cool. I can, kind of, like I said, kind of build this little world and this little story with these objects. And I think that's what really drew me to it first when I was kind of, like I said, exploring all these different options at art school. That stood out to me like initially, like I was so drawn to it from the get-go, and that customization kind of aspect of it, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Would you say that there's a bit of overlap with like concept art and still life?
I think there definitely is, because you're sort of, you can paint a still life as precisely as you want. That's not typically how I do it. I'll kind of pick and choose my favorite aspects of things that are up there, push and pull things around. So it is very similar to concept art in that way, where you're kind of working in fantasy, or sci-fi, or you can really push these boundaries to a place that isn't what's literally in front of you. So I would agree. I think there's definitely a lot of overlap, and there's so much you can do. There's so much you can do with still life.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people misunderstand and think that a still life is like the typical bowl of like fruits.
Right.
I feel like that's the first thing that everyone just thinks of when they think still life.
Yeah,
But yeah, I agree. There's so much more to it. And like objects themselves have personality and they have a story to tell, especially
they
when
do.
they're surrounded by other objects that push that narrative as well. So,
Right.
it's really cool. It's almost like, if someone does a still life of like, oh, the alchemist like desk or something, and it's like all of these
Hmm.
cool knickknacks and like glass and I can already
Right.
like yeah, it tells a story. It's like yeah, it's just a different way of doing it. Instead of like a face or a model, it's an object, which
Right.
is obviously well, it's an object that's man-made essentially, except for fruits and like,
Hmm.
natural things, but it's still touched by us in some way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask also because you know, I think it's something I wish I would ask more often, and that is who or what would you say is your greatest influence in your work?
Uh, I think the first influence was my dad, obviously, growing up with him, seeing his work, seeing what he did for work, uh, definitely my first influence. But I remember a specific day at when I was in art school, super early on. I was talking to my painting teacher, and I was telling him like, I really like still life. This is really cool. I think it's really fun. And he's like, dude, if you like still life, you need to check out David LaFell's work. I was like, I'd never heard of him. And he's like, wait here. And he went and he got his book, The Oil Painting Secrets from a Master. He brought it down and he's like, look at this. If you want to do still life, or if you're interested in still life, this is where to start. And I mean, I looked through it over lunch and I couldn't put it down because it was eye-opening. It was like awakening to me because like you just mentioned, a lot of the still life I had seen really was like the bowl of fruit, which can be really cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. Um, but I saw what David LaFell does with just simple, kind of everyday objects, like a glazed piece of pottery and a peach and some grapes. And like his ability to elevate those objects to like this, like godlike, or for lack of a better word, like epic level was really striking. And I remember thinking like, wow, like you can make this stuff look that cool with still life. And it was beautiful. And it was like, I want to make people feel the way that I feel right now looking at this with, whatever still life I end up doing. So I remember like that day was huge. And from that point, it was like, okay, on oil painting days, I'm painting still life because I want to do that. I want to make people feel that way. When they see these, everyday objects, I think there's so much power in that, and it's really cool. It was super inspiring. So I think, definitely that day in his work, and then also I love Chardin's work. With the same idea, just everyday household objects that are just beautiful. It's striking, and I couldn't stop looking at them. And I was really drawn to the ability of an artist to use still life to elevate these things that maybe we take for granted or don't really take a second look at, in our everyday life. The ability to make them feel important was super cool. And I still carry that that inspiration with me today. It was a huge turning point for the direction I wanted to take, my training then. So
Ah. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by Faso. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's faso.com/podcast. Yeah, that's awesome. I love David Lafell. I love it.
I do too. I
Yeah.
haven't met him. I really wish I could meet him.
Mhm.
Because his work is just it's insane. It's so
Yeah. Yeah,
good.
it breathes. It breathes.
Yeah.
That's the it's amazing. Yeah, Oil Painting Secrets from a Master was one of my very first oil painting books that I got,
Nice, nice.
and it was before I even knew how to oil paint. I bought it hoping it would teach me.
Okay.
And I did like, when I would read through it, I did feel like I got it, but I feel
Yeah.
like if I reread it now, I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, these concepts were way too complicated for me to get way back then."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, David Lafell, yeah, he's a great influence to have. It's kinda like I feel like David Lafell with, like, still life is, like, the equivalent of, Alla Prima and, oh my god, Schmid, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
like, there's,
That's
like,
another
that.
book.
Yeah, that's another book that's absolutely
Crazy.
stunning, stunning. It's I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people, it's like a Bible for them, like a painting
Yeah,
Bible.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And they're, wonderful people as well, which, I don't know, just I feel like that deifies them even more, like, being a good
Sure.
person and a good painter,
And
holy
you're
crap,
super
like,
nice. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, but
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I can totally see the influence in your work, there's that the copper, the brass, the shiny, like, object, and then the
Yeah.
darkness, and the I guess, like, almost like bare tables, or, like, yeah, all of those are, like, wonderful textures. I feel like that's one of the nice things about Lafelle, and that I also see in your work that is quite beautiful.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess I owe my sort of obsession with still life somewhat to him. So,
yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I hope you meet him then, to
yeah.
thank him, because kudos. You've done
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Um, and then actually, I have an extra question for you that I didn't
Sure.
include. Um, what is your goal with your still life paintings?
I think ultimately, my whole goal, in being an artist is to make a living doing something I love. Nothing crazy. Like I just want to like be a craftsman in my craft and try to be the best artist that I can be, and hopefully make a comfortable living with that. More philosophically, I think I'm still trying to figure out like what I'm trying to say, if I'm trying to say anything, because for a long time I painted stuff that I thought literally just looked cool and that carried me for a long time and still does. But I'm starting to realize like I could probably, if I wanted to, paint whatever I want. And what does that look like, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? I think I'm still very much evolving in my my long-term goal for like my body of work, I guess you could
Mm.
say. Um, so yeah, I'm not really sure. I think ultimately, like I just want to, like I said, be a craftsman in this craft and try to push myself to be the best, the best artist I can be. Honestly, that's the overriding, I think, mission that I have.
Yeah.
That's try to what I try to bring to the easel every day. Just be better than the day before, if possible.
Mhm.
And it's not always the
Yeah.
case, but
No, it's unfortunate, but yeah, it happens where, like, it's almost like you take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, kind of
right.
sometimes. I feel like that happens to everyone, and everyone sees, like, painters, and they think, "Oh, you probably just, like, make a good painting every single time." You probably, like every painting is probably, like, even better than the last, and it's like,
Yeah.
I really wish.
Yeah, I wish that was the case. I mean, I would have so many paintings. I wouldn't know what to do with them if that was the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah,
Most of them are in a
exactly.
pile over there, but
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, I feel like, that's something to really emphasize to people is of, like, 10 really great paintings, you probably have 20 to 30 that are failures, and they're sitting in a
yep,
pile, and that's
yep,
okay, it's part of the process. Not
exactly.
yeah, not everything's gonna be perfect, and not you don't it's like every day when you're in front of the canvas and the easel, like, you're not always in the headspace, right? You're not
Right.
like sometimes what you bring to the easel is probably maybe today it's, like, a little bit more suffering than yesterday or, like, a
Hmm.
little bit more joy than yesterday or like, it really varies, and it's such an organic thing that, I think that's also yeah, it's very good to emphasize that as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I've found as well, the failed paintings tend to lead to the successful ones. Like I'll bring, if I'm consciously trying to learn from a failed experiment or a failed painting, I can bring some of that lesson into my next one. And I think over, the painting process, over the time spent in the studio, that all adds up. And then one day it's like, there it is. Like I've learned from all of these failures. Here's the painting that
Mhm.
resulted from it. And I can almost literally sometimes look back at these failed paintings and be like, I took that and that and that, and I learned from all of those failures and I created this. And it's a really like frustrating process, to fail that many times and not, at the end of the day have a painting. But it's so rewarding if once I realized that, the ones that didn't work led to the one that did. And
Mm.
it's frustrating and like weirdly beautiful that way because it's so imperfect. But
Yeah, yeah, and it represents that growth as well. Um,
yeah.
Growing pains are legit, especially with painting.
Oh yeah.
So I completely yeah, I feel that. I feel that. And then you mentioned, wanting to live from your work. What advice would you give to an artist who's actually looking to start living from their work?
I think the most important thing for me is to paint what you love and paint what you're truly passionate about. because you can literally paint anything. Why, like, don't waste your time painting things that you aren't interested in, or don't feel something about, because I think that comes through. I know it comes through. I see it sometimes in some of those failed paintings where, I just wasn't passionate about this setup or this subject, or um, I think that really, like you said, even your headspace kind of comes through in your work. So I would always recommend, like, finding something that you love to paint and just painting that. Stick with that. Fall in love with the process. Fall in love with uh, the subject matter, whatever it is. Just really get passionate about it, and yeah, I think that'll come through in your work, and collectors will see that. It comes through on social media. It's maybe the most important thing to me is kind of following that, where your interests are, and what you're, like, desperate to paint next. Um, and another thing, it kind of ties into that, is don't paint specifically to sell. I think, if, I know I can sometimes get stuck in a rut where it's like, I'll do a painting and, like, it sells and it's great. And I'll kind of find myself falling back into that same framework that successful painting was in. So, and collectors and viewers in general of your work can see that, I think, when it's like you're just kind of playing the same note over and over again. Um, so yeah, I think those are the two, like, core principles that I think will lead to a career in the arts. Is, find something you're really passionate about, and stick to that, and don't just paint to sell something. As vague as that might sound, but
No, yeah, it makes perfect sense because it also implies like emotional sustainability too,
mhm,
because it's really hard to, mm, yeah, it's really hard to just like live a life where you are living for others long term. Because,
mhm,
like you're saying, like if you just paint to sell, you're painting for the other. And what if that other doesn't even really exist or hasn't come across your work? It's going to be disappointing. Like if you're going
right,
to torture yourself doing something for someone else, you might as well get a real job, like
right.
where you work 9 to 5. I'm not saying art being an artist isn't a real job. I just mean like a real
No,
job
I
in the
know what you
sense that like,
mean.
yeah, that you get like a paycheck. And
Yeah,
at least you'll be miserable, but you're getting a steady paycheck instead of being
right.
miserable and maybe not getting anything.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
it's funny you say that too, because that's part of the reason I deviated from the concept art kind of track.
Mhm,
Is, I got to see my dad, and he loved his job. I got to see his day to day, and he that job, not just him, but as a concept artist, you're kind of painting and drawing other people's ideas.
mhm,
So it's like you're kind of not working to you know create your own specific vision. You're working within these frameworks. So don't yeah, don't do that in the studio while you have the
mhm.
freedom to paint what you're really passionate about. Um, yeah, so I think that that kind of ties in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And speaking of, like day jobs and whatnot, have
Mhm.
you like what have you done to help you supplement your income as an artist?
So now that I do this full time, I teach workshops. I teach one or two workshops a year, and that's been great. I've just started to I've started exploring selling prints of my work, as opposed to just originals. But honestly, the what I did for, the early part of my career in art school is I had other part-time jobs.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal, but early on it helped me out, because I could pay my way through art school, and kind of get out um, in the world while I was still trying to figure out how to do this, you know.
Mhm,
And I was really fortunate then to have some really good jobs that kind of brought something to the table for me, in terms of the way I approach art. I worked for a landscaping company, which was great. And it was really hard work. And it taught me the importance of really hard work and how much that pays off. And then later on, when I started doing this more full time, I bartended for a little bit, and that kind of helped me out because it brought me out of my shell a little bit more. I wasn't just in the studio; I was out talking to people, and you know, service industry stuff is good for that. You got to talk to them because you can't just stand there. Um, so I think that while not ideal to have something that's not art early on, I think that kind of helped me. But nowadays, like I said, I do workshops, and I've, like I said, started exploring selling prints of my work. So little things like that definitely help.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, you get this crossover of things that you learn from these side hobbies, or not side hobbies, but side jobs that
Mhm.
feed into your own practice as an artist, because it makes sense, right? And I bet too that being a bartender must have helped you also learn to better communicate, like, and bring that into how you communicate with your work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it really, I mean, not that I was like a super shy person before, but it really kind of bartending kind of puts you on this stage in front of people,
Hmm.
and it really did help, like you said, build some communication skills, and it was pretty good for the time. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'd want to do that again, but
Oh,
um
yeah, it's pretty it sounds like it's pretty intense. Any
yeah.
service industry job is, I think, really hard on the psyche.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, I can see that thousand-yard stare of, "Oh, yeah."
I had it pretty easy too. I worked at a brewery, so it was a tap room. It wasn't like I wasn't, you know, making 200 drinks a night. It was
Right.
pretty easy stuff. But yeah, the impression I got of some of the other bars, at least in town, were,
Mm.
it's not the easiest thing.
Yeah,
But
definitely not. But that's awesome because, it's like doing hard things like that definitely prepares your headspace for when you're faced with, like, a really challenging painting.
yeah,
Because it forces you to push past it or set it aside and try again, I mean, at least in a painting, it's that easy.
right.
With the service industry, it isn't quite easy, um, but it definitely prepares you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it prepares you to get uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable, because that's important with art and painting too. Is if you're not uncomfortable, you're maybe not doing something completely right.
Yeah,
Not growing or
yeah,
not pushing through that, like you said. So
yes, yes, wholeheartedly, yes. You have to be uncomfortable, at least a
yeah,
little bit. That's where the growth happens,
yep.
like you said. And I did wanna ask you, and this is gonna sound a little bit, because I personally struggle with the idea of branding in the sense
Mhm.
of it almost dehumanizing, like, work sometimes, or even artists. But I did wanna ask you what your opinion on branding as an artist is, and do you find that it is useful to see yourself as a brand?
I think it is useful because I think as soon as you start putting your work out there, you're kind of starting down the path of being a brand, because we're all individuals. Um, so I think it's important to be aware of it, but I don't think that I don't know, at least for me, I'm afraid that if I kind of like put it in stone, like I am this type of artist, I do this type of work, this is my brand. I think that might be limiting, especially early on. I still feel like I don't necessarily want to tie myself down to one specific look or type of painting. Um, so I think it's something that probably develops over time.
Mhm.
You'll kind of experiment with stuff and come up with your own look and feel and different types of subject matter. And I think it kind of organically grows. At least I think it is for me.
Yeah.
Because I think if I, like I said, if I just put my foot down and said, I only paint eye level still life with these certain things, and that's what I'm going to be known for. Maybe I won't push myself to grow outside of that one specific avenue. Not that there's anything wrong with being good at one thing, but for me, I think I want to leave my options open for the future because, I want to try to I want to try to grow as an artist. So I think it's kind of like a weird, I guess, double-edged thing where you are a brand because you're you and you're putting your work out there that is specifically yours. But I don't know. I think I try not to focus too much on it because I want to just keep growing and keep doing new stuff. And, maybe I won't even, my work won't even look the same in, a couple of years. So um, that's kind of my take on it. The one the one branding thing I did do is, my signature is a logo. It's not my name. Um, I wanted early on, first of all, to have a pretty recognizable signature. Um, and that was inspired by how bad my name looked when I tried to spell out Atherholt with a brush on a painting. So I think something like that is one step I've definitely taken in that direction, where it's like I want people to recognize my signature, which is happens to be a logo. Um, so those are kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
think.
it's yeah, it makes sense too. It's almost like if you start thinking about branding before you think about yourself, like you're putting the cart before the horse, right? Like it
Mhm.
should follow, right? Like it shouldn't be the priority. And I think that's
Right.
yeah, I agree that a lot of people think of it backwards, rather than you're a person, this is what you like, and
Yeah.
it'll inevitably come through. And I really like that you mentioned that you don't want to put yourself in in like a box, right? Because you want to leave yourself
Mhm.
open for experimentation and open for, like you said, that growth. Because primarily, as artists, what we do is it's more for us than for anyone else.
Right.
And it should pretty much remain that way as much as possible because that's how you grow and that's how you like, I don't know, find a higher purpose than just,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, I'm painting for such and such thing over there, and I'm just gonna keep doing it because
Yep.
that's what I'm good at." But that stagnates you.
It does. Yeah. And you'll burn out that way. I mean, I've dealt with some burnout because I've fallen into that, like I said, fallen into that rut of like, well, this works. I'm just going to do this. But,
Mhm.
you can only paint a pear in grapes the same way so many times before you start to really not like it and
Yep.
really lose interest. And um, it's something I try to be very aware of is like, don't get stuck in one box. Just try something new. Just do something weird with a painting, and you'll feel better at the end of it and take something with you. And, you won't get railroaded into
Mhm.
one specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one more thing that I would wanna mention is, you don't have to show that to anyone.
Right.
Like, we always feel this pressure of like, "Oh, I have to put it on social media or I have to post on social media. If I don't post, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
shadow banned or whatever." So yeah, you don't have to show everything,
No.
and that's okay. Like, be
Yeah, you probably
free.
shouldn't show everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which brings me actually to social media because you have quite a big social media. You have 88,000 followers,
It's
which
kind
is
of crazy.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a good sized town right there.
Mm.
Um, so I wanted to ask you if you have any social media tips for artists who maybe are looking to grow their following.
The thing that's worked for me the best sort of ties back to, you know, paint what you're truly interested in. Paint what you're invested in, what you're passionate about. And like I said, it comes through no matter what size your audience is, they'll see it. They'll see that you're excited. They'll see that you are, like I said, just passionate about what you're working on. So I think at the ground level, that is how I approach social media. I don't post paintings that I'm not excited about. Um, so I'd say start there, and also kind of pay attention to the trends that are going on. Reels exploded. Was that a year or two ago? Um, that was huge. That honestly, starting to post reels was like how I grew my following to what it is. And it was insane. Like I couldn't believe it. Um, but also too, like pay attention to the trends, maybe put your own spin on it, try to like navigate your own way and carve your own unique sort of content through the what is popular and what's kind of going off on social media. So I'd say those two things are at least what drive me when posting my work, sharing my
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. And then actually I just want to ask you too, have you found that you've sold more through social media, or do you like, or have you sold also more through a gallery, for example?
The majority of my sales are gallery sales, but I do. I mean, a lot of commissions come through social media.
Mhm.
I'll talk to people, see something they like, and then they'll contact me like, "Hey, I love this, but could you add something, whatever their vision is." So I think social media for me has really driven commissions, which is great because I love the commission process and really making something that somebody's excited about and is their own, in some ways, their own idea. So I'd say in that way, it's good for, at least on my end, driving commission specifically. But I do also sell work through Instagram and social media. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, I like asking because, sometimes, the amount of followers you have doesn't really correlate with sales.
right.
Because sometimes, it's like looky-loos or like people who like they support you, but sometimes they can't afford your work, or sometimes they just follow because they're like, oh, this is cool, and they just follow, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's why I like asking because it's like the more followers you have, the oftentimes the less sales because it's like relative, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's like a
Yeah,
sliding
exactly.
scale.
So it's yeah, so it's good to know that you still get commissions and still get opportunities,
Hmm.
with your large following. So
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. And then speaking of, like side things that you do to get sales, do you have any upcoming shows or workshops that you would like to promote?
Yeah. I'm doing a workshop this fall in Austin, Texas at Ara4 Tattoo and Gallery. It's a great space. I've done a couple workshops with them in the last few years, and it's awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. It's October 11th through the 13th. So that's coming up. I'm super excited to run a workshop out there. And I'm also at one of the galleries that represents my work. They're having a summer salon, and I have 8 new paintings that are going to kind of debut there. So that's at Canary Gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, and that's in August. So those are kind of the big high points coming up for me. So
It's so exciting.
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And then where can people find more of your work?
So my website's the best place. I have everything that's in the galleries on my website, blairatherholtart.com. And the galleries have websites, but everything can be found, links to all of that through my own personal website. So yeah, blairatherholtart.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Blair, for your time and for your advice and for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I've been really excited for this. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.